Good day to you. How do you feel about a summary of a summary? Right? You've been doing chapter summaries all semester long, and now here we are at chapter 14, which is essentially a summary of all of the chapters in the book. So let's take it on so that we can understand not only where we have traveled in this course, including all of the perspectives that we've studied, but also how you can assess which two perspectives you want to study in your final paper to analyze a sample of media content. So let's take it on. The book uses a questionable metaphor. I've got to say, they use a pachyderm. You know what a pachyderm is? Like a giant elephant. And they're trying to get across the metaphor that if you go up and touch the leg of the elephant, you're not really getting a feeling of what the snout looks like. Is a snout on an elephant? The nose. You're not getting a feeling of that because the elephant's too big and you're too far away from it. And that's the way that they've approached the subject of different frameworks of media criticism in this book. It's like you're touching one part in one chapter, but you're not seeing the rest of the elephant, the rest of the pachyderm. That's the name for that elephant in classical etymology, which is a word for the root of words, if you know etymology. So that's what we're taking on here. And the book basically is broken down into three sections, and these three sections are characterized by approaches. And the approaches then are divided into the theoretical frameworks. So the very first approach was an industry analysis approach, looking at how media function as industries. We took a look at Marxism, also known as critical cultural studies. When we took a look at that, we focused on the profit motive. We looked at economics of the media industry. Then we looked at ideology, a way of seeing the world. That's all part of the effects of the way that the industry is structured. And ideology is a term that we also took on in other chapters as well. Also in approach number one, the industry approach, we had the organizational framework. We took a look at that where the focus was on hierarchies of organizations and relationships that are present that influence the content. And we looked at how the economy is a factor in organizations, but it's only one factor that influences the media industry. There are norms, there are rules, that there are practices that take place within organizational hierarchies. And then finally, under industry analysis, we took a look at pragmatic theory, pragmatic analysis that looks at the federal and the state regulation of media organizations. It focuses mainly on the consequences and the contingencies to help us understand the quality of media content. So that was approach one, and then we moved away. That was the first third of the course, and then we moved away and we moved into the next approach, and that was a media message approach, taking a look at the content, the body of the mammal, if you want to go back to the pachyderm metaphor there. So we looked at rhetorical analysis. That's the study of how signs and symbols move audiences towards thoughts and behaviors. And we tied that to ancient Greece, which is where rhetoric comes from. We decided that we would be looking at meanings when we were looking at when we look at media content from a rhetorical analysis. Next up, we looked at cultural analysis. Cultural analysis is where we're focusing on how texts embody and transmit ideology, or ways of seeing the world from one generation to the next. Ideology, according to cultural analysis, is implicit in every culture. Then we took a look at psychoanalytic analysis. Psychoanalytic analysis, the first of several chapters that were related to each other. And the psychoanalytic perspective looks at how human drive and desire manifest themselves in relation to media consumption. We seek media to satisfy those drives. We also did take a look at bodily functions that take place, media satisfying bodily functions. Then from there, we went on to feminist analysis. Feminist analysis is how texts frame ideological characterizations of gender, how they start to structure the expectations that we have for women and men in terms of their behavior. This is the first analysis that takes a posture of trying to disrupt previous systems of patriarchal power and to try and get at those systems through an aggressive exposing of the differences that still exist, discrepancies that still exist between men and women in terms of how they're treated in media content. From there, we went to queer analysis. Queer analysis focuses on how texts normalize issues of sexuality. And again, we have a disruptive approach here that's trying to chase the elusive ambiguity that exists on the sexuality spectrum, according at least to the author's viewpoints. Okay, that wraps up the 2/3 part of the course. And then we go to the last third of the course, last third of the book. It's approach number 3. We took a look at media audiences. Now we move from industry to the message to audiences. First, we looked at reception analysis, which is all about how the audience is the primary site of making meaning. It's not in the message, it's not in the industry, it's in the audience. And often the text is read differently from how the producers intended it to be read. Ethnography is a tool. It's a tool for getting at reception analysis, and that's where you go into the field and collect data that way. From there, we went to sociological analysis, or how audiences use media to manage interactions with others. Sociology is all about society, and we looked at how media provide tools for resolving guilt when we took a look at Kenneth Burke. From there, we went on to erotic analysis to understand the role of pleasure is a powerful force in driving our media consumption. We talked about how writerly texts are allowing audiences unique pleasures because they get to fill in a lot of the content and participate themselves. Then from there, we went to ecological analysis. Ecological analysis, our last perspective that we talked about in the class, and that focuses on how the media are our environment. They're not just ancillary to our environment. They are our environment. Your televisions, your phones, your laptops are all over the world that you live in. And we looked specifically at medium theory. Medium theory is how the changes in technology that we're using are affecting in the ways that we interact with each other. It's all about the medium. All of which brings us to the final part of the book, which is to not just stand on criticizing according to theoretical perspectives, but to urge all students in this class, and anything you can do to get others as well, to take on 3 new ways of behaving as you approach your media consumption in the future. One way of behaving is to have media literacy, and that means any opportunities that come up to learn about how media function, you should take. This is one of them that you've done in class, but there are workshops that are out there. You'll be involved in training sessions at your company. You want to learn, or we hope that you want to continue to learn, how modes of operation in media have a bearing on your life. Yeah, your life is not just, it's got this media part to it. Media have a major impact. And in order to do that, you've got to have literacy to understand the codes and the logics and the powers that are involved in the consumption of media. Next up, you could do what's called culture jamming as a behavioral change. Cultural jamming, that's the use of familiar media symbols and channels to reveal and overturn the consumerist or capitalist ideologies they embody. The use of parody or humor is a good example. I'd like to refer you to an organization that will demonstrate or illustrate this. It's called Adbusters. You can take a look at it. Adbusters, they create ads, and using the format of a radio or TV commercial, format of an advertisement, they use it to critique the advertising system itself. Then finally, we have media reform. This is changing our laws. Any efforts to change the laws, to change the structure and organization of the mass media industries, to increase, for example, alternative media outlets, or to focus on media policy and regulation, or to develop other kinds of outlets for people who don't have access to those outlets because they don't have the money, they don't have the internet, broad speed, etc. So this then takes us to the end of the course on media criticism. It is my hope that you are now a professional critiquer of media, and that anytime you take in media content, you've got a number of ways of analyzing what you're seeing based on the theoretical perspectives that you've educated yourself in through this class. I really look forward to reading your papers and seeing which 2 perspectives you've chosen and which one you think is more effective to analyze the particular media content sample you have selected. There will be no video in tomorrow's course. This wraps up your final instructor video. Have a great day.